Ann Arbor, Michigan is providing access to millions of dollars for business startups. Mike Flanagan of Ann Arbor SPARK tells us all about it on the Midwest Flourish. Greetings, I'm Rick Farrant, and I'm your host for the Midwest Flourish. Our guest today is Mike Flanagan, Vice President of Capital Programs at Ann Arbor SPARK in Michigan. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
So your mission, as I understand it, is to boost the tech ecosystem by helping business startups, especially in the early stages. And I know the Ann Arbor area ranks high nationally for starting a business. So perhaps you can begin by giving us a summary overview of Ann Arbor SPARK, and that would include its genesis.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. So Ann Arbor SPARK, I started in the early 2000s, and it's really a public-private partnership between the city of Ann Arbor, the University of Michigan, and then corporate interests within the city of Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County. More broadly, we're an economic development organization, so our mission has always been to try to grow businesses in the region and and retain them, and then hopefully attract some in the process. And we started really with a focus on entrepreneurship and trying to help a lot of the startups that were spinning out of University of Michigan, which you may have seen. I mean, U of M has historically been one of the top tech transfer schools in the country. So we've had a lot of great activity there. But I think got recognized in the early 2000s by actually one of our former governors, Rick Snyder, was the original chairman of the board, one of the founders, and Mary Sue Coleman, who was president of U of M at the time, recognized that a lot of those startups weren't able to stay because they needed capital and other services. And so they were leaving for the coasts where that was much more plentiful. And so Spark was designed to kind of be an anchor for programs and services and capital to help startups stay here and grow and learn about how to grow a startup. And then over the years, we've kind of evolved, and we've got a more traditional economic development part of our organization as well that focuses on the larger companies in the region and trying to help them retain them and help them expand and work with them across a whole host of services. So yeah, we cover all of Washtenaw County, which is where Ann Arbor is located, and but I think we kind of punch above our weight class in terms of the impact that we have for the state as a whole.
Yeah, and don't you also do some work in surrounding counties?
We do. Yep. Historically, we've done some work in Livingston County as well, and had a contract with them. And some of the surrounding counties over periods of time have contracted with us because we've got a reputation for economic development, and in some counties where they don't want to stand up their own and fund their own, it's easier to contract with us. And so we've helped a lot of other communities with startup work, and more so on the traditional economic development side, and helping them bring in companies and expand companies in their regions.
And what comprises the tech ecosystem? What kind of businesses and industries are we talking about?
So we're really talking about, when we talk about tech, kind of the high tech industries of, information technology, software, advanced manufacturing kind of technologies, cybersecurity, mobility, electric vehicles is one a lot of people talk about. But then also we have a big presence on the life science side. So, companies that are doing drug discovery and making medical devices and diagnostic devices and kind of a whole range of things. And it's companies that we think have the potential to create an outsized impact for the region, because these are the types of companies that, traditionally get venture capital dollars to grow, and can go from, one employee or two employees in the early days to within, in an ideal case, it could be 7 or 10 years, and suddenly you've got hundreds or thousands of employees And so, I think Michigan, like a lot of the Midwest, saw what happened in Silicon Valley and some other parts of the country in the 90s, and said, boy, this is where a lot of the economy is going. And as a traditionally, Rust Belt kind of manufacturing, hard scrabble state, which we still love and we support, but saw we needed to diversify the economy and kind of move in the direction of some of these 21st century industries, if you will.
And you have a model for acquiring capital for startups, beginning with helping them get through what you have called the Valley of Death, which is fledgling businesses that really aren't bringing in a lot of revenue. Perhaps you can take us through the process.
Yeah, it's for folks that aren't familiar with this space, if you think of a high tech startup in the early days, and you kind of think of we have two guys in a garage or whatever out in California, and it really is, kind of an idea in the beginning, and oftentimes you've got a technologist that's involved and has done a lot of research and is starting to think about how I want to turn this into a product and commercialize it over some period of time. And what happens when you talk about the Valley of Death is that's really talking about kind of the negative capital situation for some period of time, because you're spending money to do research and develop a product or a service, and then you're trying to get to a point where you can have a often you hear like MVP or minimum viable product, where you can go and start to market that with potential customers. And that can take years, to get to that point, and then years beyond that, even to start really making good revenue. So you start coming out of that valley and get to kind of a growth stage. And so capital is really what's needed at that stage from what we call them risk capital investors, which is sort of a continuum of groups along that path. And which culminates in kind of the traditional venture capital, which is the big VCs out there that are putting tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in these companies as they get to a point where they can really grow fast. But even before that, you've got angel investors and funds like ours. We have a fund called Spark Capital that does pre-seed and seed stage investing, which is kind of the first round of outside investment that companies will take in to get that first, couple $100,000 to maybe a couple $1 million to really go from idea to, a sellable product, and then, help them with the initial hiring to go to market.
Yeah. Do you wind up counseling companies or prospective companies or startups on things that they might have to do to make them more attractive for investment? I mean, is that part of the role that you have?
Yeah, it's a big part of the role. And and even before companies get to the stage where we're talking to them, we have at Spark, we have what's called the entrepreneurial services team, which is actually the largest portion of our organization that completely is focused on that, and helping startups from the point of formation to we have a grant program called the Business Accelerator Fund that we give them small dollars early on to help them go through the process of building out the business. But a lot of it is counseling and working with mentors, and a lot of programming, including a entrepreneur boot camp that we have to help them understand that process. And yeah, I think that's one of the big obstacles for companies, maybe particularly in the Midwest, because they just, the culture has not been around startups for, whatever, 100 years now. And so going out to raise money is new, and we got a lot of first time founders. So there is this kind of an uphill battle to learn the way investors think, and sort of what you need to do to make yourself attractive.
And you probably haven't thought about this, but like what percentage of ideas, in these early stages do you just nix? Do you just send folks packing and say, you know what, you need to come back with a better idea because this isn't going to fly?
Yeah, it's more common than not, and some of that is the path to raising this type of capital is pretty narrow. They're looking for very specific types of companies that can scale quickly. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the traditional number you hear is like 1 or 2% of companies that actually go to raise venture capital are able to get it. I think it's a higher rate as you go earlier in that continuum. So you'll see a higher percentage of companies that can raise, kind of pre-seed and seed rounds, and then you start to see a drop off from there. But yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. There's a new, as I understand it, $60 million Michigan Innovation Fund that Spark is one of the fund managers for to help pre-seed and seed stage funding. Just give me an idea of how that's going to help your efforts. I mean, that's not the only money that you have available to you, but this is a new source of revenue.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been working on this for several years. A group of kind of the early stage funds in Michigan that had gotten some money from the state many years ago. The state had gotten very involved in the early 2000s through sort of 2010 timeframe in trying to fund early stage investment to help companies stay in the state and be able to start their growth path. And so Spark and Invest Detroit and a few other groups like Michigan Rise throughout the state banded together as a coalition to advocate for more funding, and basically told the story that unless we have some of this early stage funding, we're going to just go back to what we had pre early 2000s, which was companies leaving the state in droves to find the capital they needed. And so really it's been a challenge to get there because it was a process of lobbying with the legislature and the governor's office. But fortunately, that got approved at the end of last year. And since then, we've started investing out of those funds. And yeah, I mean, we think it's going to enable us to invest in, hundreds or maybe thousands of new startup companies in Michigan, and really be able to help them grow and get to the next stage, which is potentially, additional venture capital funds to turn into much larger companies that help support employment and investment in the region. So, yeah, I think we kind of act as an anchor, if you will, at the very earliest stages. We're looking at these companies, we're supporting them after we invest. Sometimes we're becoming board members and, or advisors and helping them kind of reach the next stage of growth.
Yeah, and you're also the director of the Michigan Angel Fund.
Yeah.
And tell me about that and exactly your role or what it is that fund does. Are you
Yes.
you manage the fund?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Spark recognized, early on that angel investment was a critical ingredient to success for this early stage capital kind of larger picture. And we just didn't have a lot of angel investors in Michigan. I mean, people really didn't know what it was 25 years ago, for the most part. But it was, it's been a 10 to 25 billion dollar a year industry in the country for decades, mostly on the coast. And basically the process was understanding that, hey, we've got a lot of high net worth individuals in Michigan. I mean, Michigan is still one of the wealthiest states in the country. And we need to tap more of that and say, hey, you don't need to send all your money to Morgan Stanley or Merrill Lynch. That takes some portion of it, and a small portion of it, and devote some of it to the local economy and local startups where, number one, you're going to be supporting those startups and helping, the region potentially. But, you have this potential for really outsized returns. And so it was a compelling story. We started the first fund about 15 years ago. It was actually modeled after an Ohio fund that started some years before that, where we basically said, hey, we're going to kind of start like a mutual fund for angel investors where you can put some money into the fund. And then we had a fund management team, and we put together a governance, screening committee and different committees to help make investment decisions. And then as an angel investor, you would get a portion of each of the investments that we invested in through the fund, which usually we did about 10 investments per fund, all Michigan, early stage tech companies. And then on top of that, you can co-invest alongside the fund in any of these that you kind of want to double down on. And so, yeah, it was very successful. We're on to our fifth fund now. We've got about 160 members. I think we've invested in about 50 companies, and collectively between members and the fund, we've put in about $30 million over that period of time, and then leveraged additional capital because, like I said, this is sort of a staged process. So we're trying to help companies get to the next stage often and raise some venture capital. So anyway, it's been successful. I think it's helped grow the kind of the education around angel investing in Michigan and created some angel investors. Yeah, we hope to keep that effort going in parallel to our Spark Capital fund.
A lot of regions, excuse me, in the country, they like to tout their quality of life in attracting business. And in fact, most regions do that. And so Ann Arbor is no different. But it does, in fact, have some amenities that might be attractive to businesses, not the least of which is having a major research university in your backyard. What are some of the amenities that you like to tout in getting businesses to consider the Ann Arbor area as a place to do business?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, yes, I'm biased. I'm a University of Michigan grad, grew up in the area. It's a great town, great quality of life, just from a raising a family perspective. In fact, when I started at Spark about 10 years ago, I couldn't stop walking around town, after lunch just to take everything in. So it's a great college town. But yeah, I mean, then just from a business perspective, University of Michigan is one of the top, research institutions in the country. Just graduates very high quality talent. So, from a talent perspective, including, engineering and computer science and life science, we've got great talent. So for businesses that are, it's always a challenge, particularly as a startup, you're wanting to locate in areas where you can find that. We've got it in droves. We, at Spark have some programs to help retain the talent here, including some internship programs that companies can use to help offset those initial costs and help retain some of those folks in Michigan. Yeah, but I mean, at a high level, I mean, kind of stats around Michigan, obviously, like the rest of the Midwest, we got a very low cost of living compared to what you're going to find in the coast. So that's sort of an obvious one. I think we've got the most clean water of any state in the country, and maybe of any region in the world. So that's great in terms of quality of life and in terms of just having access to water, which is important for a lot of things for many types of businesses. And yeah, I mean, we're still, I think we rank top 5 in the country in terms of R&D spending between industry and university. University of Michigan, I think, is the top, receives the top federal grant funding every year of any public institution. So it's, multi-billion-dollar research institution. And then we're also, as you might expect, top 5 in terms of research or in terms of engineering talent, rather, per capita. So we have a lot of engineers in the state, obviously because of the auto industry, but they're across the spectrum now too, in terms of lots of other industries. So
Mike, I wanted to step in just for a second. A lot of colleges have a difficulty, keeping their grads once they
yes.
leave college. I'm guessing from what you're saying that that's not a problem, that you have the jobs there so that when they're finished with their degree, they can step right into the workplace.
I think that's true to a large extent. I mean, it's not an issue, and I think like you said, a lot of the middle of the country, I feel like, struggles with this because it's just fun to for young graduates probably to move to other cities, and there's a time of life to do that. So we see that a fair amount, but we also do see, one of the unique things about Michigan and maybe the Midwest generally is we get a lot of boomerangers. So people that spend their, early 20s to maybe like 30 in other cities, and then they meet somebody and decide to settle down and want to build their family, and they often come back. So, I mean, there's countless stories I could tell you on that. And in fact, we do a homecoming event every year through Spark and Ann Arbor Homecoming, where boomeranger types that were U of M grads in particular and are working at Google, or they're working out in New York somewhere, are home for the holidays. We do it around Thanksgiving, and we show them. It's kind of a big job show and networking event, and so we try to help that process along.
That's interesting. Is the attendance good for that?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, every year it's been, hundreds of people. So, yeah, I think I wish I had the stats in front of me, but it's been a great program. We've been doing it for, I think, 10 years now out of Spark.
Is that something that you borrowed from somewhere else, or is that something that you strictly came up with, or do you know?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I would guess there may have been some inspiration, but from somewhere else. But I know we have created a lot of, even before my time at Spark, created a lot of innovative programming. There's another one we do called Tech Trek, and it's now turned into kind of we think kind of a mini South by Southwest, where we do a week or two of events around technology and music in Ann Arbor. And the origination of that was an event called Tech Trek, where the entire community can come, and the tech startups in the community open their doors and do demos. And, it's kind of a mini job fair / tech demonstration. And it's turned into a street fair with music and food and fun stuff. So that was, I think it was my colleague Bill Mayer and our CEO Paul Krutko came up with that, 10 or 15 years ago. So we've done some cool stuff.
A quick question that I wanted to get in here. So Ann Arbor is, as I understand it, working towards becoming a carbon neutral community, and I'm kind of curious as to whether that has been beneficial in attracting and retaining businesses, or whether there is a negative connotation to that might steer businesses away. Do you know?
Yeah. I don't think so. I think it's a net positive. I hear where you're coming from on that, but I mean, speaking of younger graduates in particular, I think that's a high priority. And I think the branding, as sort of being a green city is really helpful. And I think for the types of companies that we're looking to attract on the tech side and otherwise, it's, I think it's interesting. I think, it's not something that's being mandated. So it's more of a goal. And I know that, part of that is Spark has been involved with, we've got, for example, something we call the Ann Arbor Green Business Challenge that helps businesses get certified along a range of kind of green certification areas. And there's some funding behind that, and notoriety around that. So I know that's been successful in helping some of these businesses. But yeah, I don't know. I think net it's probably a positive for the community.
So we've talked a lot about what you do. Perhaps you can share some success stories that come to mind that you've helped them from the very start, and they've grown and they've been successful.
Sure. I mean, maybe I'll start with we like everybody talks about these days, unicorns are kind of what a lot of folks hear about in terms of tech companies. And we've had, some good unicorns in Ann Arbor over the last, 5 years or so. Duo Security is a big one that does kind of single sign-on. Probably many people use it and don't realize it. It sits in the background, but great cybersecurity company that sold to Cisco, I think, quite a few years ago for over $2 billion. Llamasoft is a supply chain software company that's also in Ann Arbor, and these are all founded by U of M grads, by the way. I'll put in a nod there, but and they've done really well and turned into $1 billion company. And then the most recent is a company called Histo Sonics, this is real kind of Star Trek stuff. This is a U of M spin out. And for, it's probably been a 15+ year journey, but they've created a sonic beam technology that's non-invasive for cancer patients, and it what it does is goes into the body and actually liquefies the tumors. And so we'll be seeing this over the next 10+ years as it starts to get adopted in healthcare. I think it's now gotten through the FDA process, and it was sold to a bigger company for several $billion. And so that's really cool. It's so that's one we tout a lot.
I know, Mike, you're not a medical expert, but what happens?
Yeah.
What happens to the tumor after it's liquefied?
As I understand it, and it's called histotripsy. So if you're anybody interested in looking up the science behind it, but as I understand it, sort of liquefies and then it just leaves the body through the normal, bodily processes of expelling, cellular material. And so, yeah, it's fascinating. And literally, I think wasn't that a thing on Star Trek years ago, a little device that would just cure you by waving the wand over your body.
Well, and you also mentioned Duo Security, which I've actually used with another company that I have a relationship with, so I'm familiar with what Duo Security is, or at least I'm aware of one function of Duo Security.
Yeah.
Listen, it has been great having you on, Mike, and learning about what you're doing at Ann Arbor SPARK, and also what's going on in the Ann Arbor region. I wanted to finish up with one thing. You probably mentioned the word coasts 3 or 4 times. I could be inaccurate. And I also know that your website actually mentions the coast. You guys have a real thing about competing with the coast, don't you?
Probably, yeah. I think that comes from a hang up of years of seeing our companies, sort of, get stolen a little bit in our view, and we've just needed to shore up our resources to keep them here. So, I don't know if that's a Midwest thing in general, but we think, we think Ann Arbor is great, and so but you're right.
Well, what I've heard a lot of in the Midwest is I've heard a lot of Midwest communities competing with each other. That seems to be what's happening in Toledo, or what's happening in Lexington, or what's happening in Fort Wayne or Indianapolis or whatever. But the whole coast thing. But maybe it's because you have such a strong tech sector, and that would be something that there would be some competition on the coast for. I would guess. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, I would say it's a kind of competition with the Midwest, but also collaboration. I think we know it's important. We're always going to be competitive with each other, but I think working together is helpful sometimes too, to bring resources together. And we work with angel groups, for example, around the Midwest to try to do deals together. So that's been helpful.
Well, listen, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for spending a little bit of time with us, Mike.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Midwest Flourish podcast. Want to dig deeper or get involved? Head to marketingthemidwest.com to explore how we can work together to empower your community to flourish. Let's keep the Midwest momentum going and shape the future of our region together.